Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. Today, we are so excited to have Dr. Stephanie Pearson here with us, and she's going to be talking about her entrepreneurial journey and telling us all the challenges and all the really great wins she's had along the way in hopes of inspiring some of you out there who are maybe considering entrepreneurship, considering starting your own business, and would like to know how to start. So welcome, Stephanie. Can you tell everyone a little bit about how you started as an entrepreneur?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. So my journey is probably a little bit different than a lot of your community in that it was almost a forced shift. I was happy in medicine and loved what I was doing, and quite honestly, never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur. And then unfortunately, I suffered a career-ending injury during a difficult patient delivery. I'm an OBGYN by training and was turning 40 and lost my career, lost my identity. I was the primary breadwinner in our house, and there was a lot of what's next. And it took some time to figure it out. I tried my hand at a few things. I really actually enjoyed doing med mal defense work. Turns out in Pennsylvania, you have to physically see patients within 3 years or you time out as an expert. So that was a short-lived career. I did some medical editing, I did some biotech consulting, and ultimately somebody made a comment to me that really resounded. And they said, everyone has information that somebody else could benefit from. And if you really sit back kind of with your own story, because everyone has their own story, it'll come. And at first I was like, right, okay. Um, but it really did. I realized that I became so passionate about such a mundane topic. I mean, who really thinks about going into insurance and who thinks about disability and life insurance as a career after medicine? But I learned a lot the hard way
Mhm.
and found myself in a position where I thought for a second, you know what? I do have a lot of information that really could help other people. And I started, digging in and learning everything I could. And I'll age myself. I had textbooks with highlighters and colored pens and write all the things, and started really lecturing to area residency programs, partly for education, admittedly, partly for catharsis. The more I told my story, the easier it got to tell my story and the less painful it became. And at the same time, I felt really good about continuing being an educator because at the end of the day, even when I was a clinician, teaching residents was one of my favorite things to do. And so I found this second career option that really melded some of my previous strengths. And I was able to tie in, this idea of, okay, I have information that can help other people. And residents and fellows started asking for my help. And at first, I thought it was really silly. I was like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm an educator, but I was sending them to other people who were making money, right? And my husband was like, why are we making money for other people when we can be making money for ourselves? And you're not a salesperson, you're an educator, and that's what people get drawn to. So fast forward, locked myself in my room, studied for the test, passed, and then cried in my car because I got a B, not an A. And my husband laughed at me and said, are you kidding me? Has anyone ever asked you your board scores who saw you as an OBGYN? He's like, do you really think anyone is going to ever ask you what you got on this insurance test? And we laugh about it now. And so really we started our company at our kitchen table, and through a lot of gut and hustle and learning on the job, we have grown, scaled, about a year and a half into me doing it out of my house. My current business partner and I joined forces. And so we just turned 6 in June. And so that's how it all started.
Amazing. There are a couple things I wanted to highlight, which I think are real patterns that people maybe can hear in your story that they can see in other stories as well. You had that information, right? Having gone through the experience yourself, of course, but you also had a real passion for it because you knew the real pain of having that experience and being lost and not having adequate insurance to be able to cover you. So you had that passion for helping others, which I think translates so well for us physicians, because that's why we became doctors in the first place. If we can
Exactly.
find something we have information on, but also we're very, very passionate about, then putting those two together is really, really valuable. The next thing I heard is you did it for free just to add value to people, right?
Yes.
And then that allowed you to have that following, so that I'm sure when you rolled out your product, you already had so much thought. You were seen as a thought leader already, and you had already given so much value. It's so easy for people to kind of come and work with you. And I think that sometimes we see people who are wanting to start businesses and they're like, oh, okay, I want to create this course, let me go put it out there in the world, but they haven't shown up and shown themselves to be thought leaders or kind of built a following because they were just giving.
Right.
And so that, I think that sometimes is a more difficult way to start a business than the way you did. So I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I think that, and it wasn't necessarily intentional or not intentional,
Mhm.
right? I do think that a lot of it stemmed from that kind of physician space of, right, we go into medicine because we want to help people, we want to fix things, right? And especially it was a lot of why I became an OBGYN, because GYN surgeries are relatively fast and we really fix things, right?
Mhm.
Make a really big difference. And I translated that into, and I realized that it sounds really hyperbolic to say I wanted to fix the insurance industry, but I really wanted to fix the insurance industry. I was like, we are ripe for being taken advantage of. It's not something that we're taught or taught well. I didn't feel like I had been properly educated or properly advocated for. And I felt that as kind of a natural progression of why I became a doctor.
Yep. You had a real strong mission, having been
Yes.
through it yourself. Now I do want to talk about this identity piece, which you mentioned very early on, because I think that's really, really key too. I remember when we were struggling with our identity, and I remember even White Coat Investor asking me a question at a conference, well, like, you're not really helping people the way you were before, right? Something like that. And you're not really a doctor anymore. So I want to know how you managed that combination, how you were able to bring that together and say, you know what, did you still say to yourself, like, I'm still a physician too? Or did you actually really say, I'm no longer a physician, this is what I am? Like, how did you manage that?
Not well, um, admittedly. And I am very open. I don't have secrets. I was suicidal at one point. I had not realized how much of my identity was tied to being Dr. Pearson. I
Mhm.
didn't change my name when I got married because I was known as Dr. Pearson. I wanted to stay Dr. Pearson. And I got hit in the face, um, real hard. And it took a lot of counseling. I had a therapist, I had a psychiatrist. My husband brought home a puppy. I wanted to kill him. He said, clearly, the boys and I are not enough to get you out of bed. So you have a choice. You can be surrounded by filth or get up and start taking care of something again. And that was kind of a pivotal point for me, that I didn't want to be surrounded by filth. And so I started taking our dog on long walks, to get out of the house, to get out of my own head. I went to the dog park. I say this a lot. I found myself at the dog park. I mean, it sounds like a bad country song, right? But when I was at the dog park, I was Kim's mom. Nobody knew my name. Nobody knew what I did, right? And I got to kind of let go of some of that.
Mhm.
Not to say that it doesn't creep back in. I still remember a time that I overheard somebody ask my son what his mom did, and he said she used to be a doctor, and I just started crying. And so the path from losing my identity to getting it back was very jagged. Um, Once I really got out of my own way and kind of crawled out of my own hole, I realized that, you know what? I have those letters. No one's taking those away from me. Once a physician, always a physician. I was still part of a ton of physician social media groups and local groups, and I still fit in more with my physician friends than my non-physician friends. And over time, my new identity developed where I can honestly say that I still consider myself a physician first and foremost, and will always will. And once you get those letters, no one can take them away. I mean, I guess if you're like a felon or something, but right, and so I don't look at myself, as okay, I'm going to put that aside and now I'm new, right? I still feel very ingrained in my physician space doing this work because I do a lot of what I call pre-field underwriting, and I have a lot of um, influence on the underwriting side with the different insurance companies. And a lot of that is because I'm a physician with medical knowledge. And so I've actually been able to marry my medical knowledge and my insurance knowledge in a way that your average insurance agent or broker can't do. They just don't have the same life experience. They don't have the knowledge that I have. And I also had to, at a certain point, own that and not feel egotistical is not the right word, but, you know, really honoring both sides and not um pushing an agenda one way or the other.
Yeah, I think I really wanted people to hear that. That's really cool that that's how you did it because it's the and, right? You're a physician
Mhm,
and.
mhm,
And so we see ourselves as physicians and
and
real estate investors.
right.
And, it's so interesting. I've been grappling more recently. I'm actually doing a lot of speaking now. And I haven't said and speaker, right? I haven't ever put that in my LinkedIn. I like don't even because I've never thought of myself that, right? But it's an
Right.
identity that's actually out there for me to claim if
Yep,
I choose to claim it. And so for everyone, you have multiple identities, and physician is one of them.
right.
But you don't have to feel like you're giving up being a physician when you take on other, hobbies, other jobs, other things that you do with your life. You can still be a physician and other things. So that's very cool.
And I think it's really important, to your point, I've recently started speaking more about my journey than insurance. And some of it is really important not to only look at ourselves as physicians. I think that is why I was in such a bad place in the beginning and why so many people have a hard time doing anything else or, spreading their wings a little bit because they're so ingrained in that small piece, which at the end of the day, it's a small piece, right? I mean, yes, it's a calling. Yes, it's noble. Yes, right. Physicians were great people, right? Whatever. But it's only a small part of who we are. And I think that a lot of us, especially in my generation, I think I'm a bit older than you guys, um, we weren't taught that. There was no talk of bolstering your identity outside of medicine. There was no, you know, keep your hobbies, keep this, keep that. It was very tunneled tyranny of perfection of medicine, and this is what you do, and you should live, breathe, die medicine. And I think that the younger generations are starting to see kind of a different side of sustainability, resilience, adaptability, right? And really putting into that kind of whole person wellness that just didn't exist 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's the danger of making your value or your worth in a title, right? Because, and it's the same thing. I think we talked to entrepreneurs about this too. Is if you put your value or your worth in success, entrepreneurial success, if you have success, it works out fine. But eventually, you will have failures. Like that is
Yeah.
part of it. That's part of the journey. And when you have put your value or your worth in having success, and you have some failures along the way, then you're at risk to really go into a dark place,
Yeah.
to lose who you are, to really kind of crumble in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So you can't have your value tied to external things, or else you will get lost.
I had to do a lot of work to change how I viewed accomplishments. I realized that so much of my self-worth was in doing and accomplishing and succeeding. And it's a shift of mindset, right? So I would have never, when I was practicing, taken a day by myself if I had a cold, right? We all have the stories, right? Went to work sick, hypermedic, I worked with an IV pole, right? Like that's absurd, right? Now, one of the things I view as an accomplishment is self-care. I didn't do that for a very long time, right? And so it's really shifting how you're defining things, where you're putting stock. One of the things that I tend to kind of remind myself on a fairly regular basis is, what do I want my legacy to be? And, that also sounds sometimes very overbearing, but if you break it down into really small pieces, it really does shift your focus. And, you guys have kids, you get it, right? It's, what are we showing our kids?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I didn't want them to see me, 6 feet under. I didn't want them to see me giving up. I wanted them to see, okay, look, something bad happened. What are you going to do with it? Right. And it's either going to push your hand one way or another way. And I wanted them to see resilience and, pushing through. And they've been with us the whole way when we started this company. And we were very upfront with them that there were potentially going to be periods where there were no vacations because we were self-funding and putting money back into the business. We made a very conscious decision not to go after VC money and not to go after investors. And we really wanted to do it ourselves because I'd been an employee before and tossed away. I had been asked to be the chairperson of our department before I went out, and I got terminated the day my FMLA was up. And it was a very harsh lesson. And, you're not as special as you think you are. And I didn't want to work for anybody else, right? And I think that's also kind of that entrepreneurial kickstart of like, okay, you know what? This is what we're doing. We're laser focused. This is our plan, and watch it grow, right? And that is not to say that that has been a straight line either,
Which
right?
it never is. It never
Right.
is.
And I think people I have met a few people who think that things are a lot easier than they really are.
Okay, I have one more question for her. Sorry, I'm like totally hogging the conversation, but I want to know, we've heard now you've alluded multiple times to the fact your husband's involved in this, and like that you guys did this really as a family. So can you talk to us about that journey He obviously helped you a lot with this dog. So talk to us about how this all fit in and how you would think through somebody, thinking about entrepreneurship and involving their significant other in it.
So my husband was a critical care nurse and helped start Temple University's flight team. And when I got hurt, he was absolutely my biggest cheerleader. And I know a lot of physicians who have, because of injury or illness, have had to step away from medicine, who have not had as supportive husbands. Hands down, and he is not without his own faults, but was my biggest cheerleader and was very integral in kind of setting everything up. He wanted me to focus on what I did well. And so he set up the LLC. He set up our E&O insurance. He kind of looked into the true business part of starting a business. And he really let me focus on education and relationship building within the insurance space. And about a year, maybe a year and a half into it, when we were growing at a pace that nobody expected, we made the decision for him to come full time. So he's actually our CFO, which is also helpful for me because some of the money side of it, which is going to sound interesting because I'm in insurance, but gives me a lot of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And he can deal with all that. And I know I'm not getting taken advantage of because he's the CFO and he's my husband, right? And so we have offices that are catty corner to each other. And so it's like we're together all day, but we're not. And we have our own lanes and we support each other. And there are days where it's hard not leaving home at home, but we've figured it out. And most days, I would say it's been really awesome working together and having a common goal. And he probably won't admit this, but every now and again, when he was a nurse and I was a doctor, the earning differential would come up and we make the same exact now, right? And so I think that helps in that there's not a primary and a secondary. We have the same end goal, and it's actually been great. I know a lot of couples that make it work, and I know a lot of couples that absolutely can't do it. So I mean, I think it's a testament to both people, and it's definitely not right for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. In real estate investing, we talk a lot about finding a mentor, somebody who can guide you along the way. And I'm just curious, did you have a mentor, somebody to help you on the business side of things?
Really. From a business standpoint, we learned a lot on the go, and it was truly a lot of gut and hustle. On the insurance side, I would say I had a couple mentors. I mean, one, my current business partner had been a kind of life insurance agent. And so he was very well versed in the industry. I kind of pulled out the DI space. And I had somebody who was nice enough in the beginning to make introductions for me that were invaluable. And so, from that standpoint, like in the industry, I definitely did. And even to this day, Larry Keller is still one of my biggest go-tos. And so, we text each other all the time. We talk. We run things by each other. At the end of the day, nobody has the infrastructure to take care of 1 million doctors. So you start to realize who does it the way you want to do it, and who aligns with your values and your ethics, and kind of hold true to that. And he's kind of the original. We joke, I do put him a little bit on a pedestal, but he's been doing this for 30 something years. And so having him kind of help me, reassure me that I am doing it the right way has been really helpful and reaffirming. And so on that side, yes.
I'm really curious about you were saying also that the business success wasn't linear. So can you talk a little bit about some of those ups and downs?
So initially, right, we started at my house, and our first 2 employees worked at our house,
Mhm.
in the kitchen with me. And I may have blurred some boundaries, and that sometimes can blow up in your face. And so in the beginning, I definitely struggled with the, you know, hierarchy, which admittedly I still kind of have issues with boundaries. But I would say that was one, because all of a sudden what I thought and what I said when there were 3 of us or 4 of us can't stay that way when there's 25.
Mhm.
And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't have that insight, right? And so I also said things that unfortunately I couldn't live up to. And it just kind of upset me that I couldn't. For instance, right? So like on Fridays, I would go to my favorite French bakery and get croissants and slices of, decadent cakes. Well, you can do that when you have 2 to 4 employees. You can't really do that when you have 25, right? And so there was definitely a shift when we went from being at my house to having a brick and mortar office. I would say that's one. 2, hiring in the beginning was really difficult. Um, I had never been involved in hiring in my clinical practice. And now here I am, I'm hiring for our own company. And in the beginning, we got that wrong a little bit.
Which
And in
most
the,
entrepreneurs
you
do,
know,
by the
you know,
way.
so we had a couple people that maybe worked for like a month, right?
I've
And
had people work for a week and just disappear.
yeah, so I haven't had that, but we definitely have had the 1 month, and then we're like, oh, you're okay. And so that has definitely been a learning process of, right, what are the attributes you're looking for? What are the right questions to ask? And we also didn't want people that had a lot of insurance background, right? Because here I am saying, I want to change the narrative. I didn't want to bring people in that had bad habits. So
Mhm.
now you're bringing in people that don't really know anything about it, and investing that time and energy to make everybody a cohesive team and understand why we're doing it the way we're doing it, and why we don't do certain things certain ways. And so that hiring was just a whole beast in its own. And creating benefits packages, right, and having to really work through what that looked like and what was important, right? As an OBGYN, family planning coverage was really important to me, right? And it's expensive, but I was like, okay, so it's expensive. I like I, and so figuring some of that out with somebody who comes from a true business background, sometimes, it was work getting us to be on the same page. and it's important, right? I shouldn't say I don't care about money, but I really don't care about money. Like, my bigger why truly is education. And my partner maybe leans a little more towards, bank account.
And you
But
actually need both, right? You
right.
absolutely
And that's what I'm
need
saying. Like,
both.
we need
Yeah.
both, right? So I've made him a little softer. He's made me a little more cognizant of, how much things cost and what are our commissions and how are we paying our employees, right? I want to give everybody the world, right? But that's not good business, right? And so there was definitely a learning curve there. When we first started really flipping, because now I'm also going to date myself. In the beginning, I did everything by hand. I had sheets that I would fill out, and I had a filing cabinet, and all of a sudden my filing cabinet was overflowing. And one of my employees was like, Steph, come on, it's time. Like, have you heard of DocuSign? Have you heard of e-signatures? Have you heard of CRMs? Right. And I'm like, not really. So there was also a lot of education that had to happen on the fly, and realizing that some of the systems that we put into place, right, not all of them were ideal in the beginning. And 6 years later, we're still tweaking, and kind of adapting and growing. And then, of course, COVID hit, right? So, like, in the middle of all of this, all of a sudden, everyone went hybrid, and no one was in the office except my husband and me, because we couldn't work from home. We have two very big dogs who do not like when I'm on the phone. And so we would come into the office and no one else was here. And so that was definitely an interesting time. Trying to
I
think.
want to interrupt because I want
Yeah,
to
go, please.
go back to the employee piece, because I think that would, I just want to reiterate a couple points, because I think those points will save people a lot of pain and time. So hiring, I think, is like you said, a lot of us physicians, we've never been involved in hiring decisions. So when we started this process, we were similarly very, I think, more fearful of hiring than anything. And having done this now for many, many years, I will say that the Who book by Jeff Smart is an incredible book for people to read. It really takes away a lot of that fear of hiring and helps you think about outcomes instead of tasks, and helps you think about the right DNA fit for your company. But one of the things you said is something I've only probably learned in the last 6 to 12 months, which is a lot of times people come in with expertise, but they really don't know what they're doing. If you hire somebody who's a great thinker, who's proactive, who's smart, who's hungry, right? If you think about Patrick Lencioni's book, I think it's called The Ideal Team Player. One of it is hungry and smart. Then those individuals can learn a job so fast, and they will far exceed anything that this person who has professional training, who's been doing this for 10 years, can do. So hiring, it starts with the right individual, then they move into the job and they'll kill it.
Yeah, that was one of the pieces when we went from like, and I will tell you, our first five or six employees were all connected. It was somebody's friend, it was somebody's family member. It was actually one of my favorite, one of my secretaries when I was a clinician. We'd always talked about, if I ever left the practice, but thinking if I went to another practice. And I had promised her that if I ever left, I would bring her with me. And she was our 5th or 6th employee. Like, I literally called her up and was like, hey, I made you this promise 10 years ago. I know it's not clinical medicine, but I need somebody to be a client services or a client coordinator who's very, client forward. And you're like the nicest human that I've ever known. I'd love you to come work with us. Right. And so kind of moving forward, and I read Who as well. And we finally realized, you know what, let's hire somebody who knows how to hire people. And so we did engage in a recruiter, and it's really hard to get a job here. I kind of joke it was easier for me to get into med school. But culture for us, and I know it's a word that gets thrown around so much, but it is everything.
Mhm.
And, we look for who's going to fit with the team. Are you teachable, right? Do you want to learn? How have you been resourceful in the past? How, have you taught yourself stuff in the past? Are you willing to learn, right? That means so much more to me than just about anything else, because let's face it, very few things are rocket science, right? And so the majority of what we do is teachable. And so that's really been our focus. And I think you have to go through like 4 interviews
Us too. 4.
to get a job with us.
Yeah.
I get brought in at the very end.
Yeah.
And I say we've been lucky, but I think it's what we've done. We've had really little turnover since the very beginning. Like once we got that piece figured out, we have had amazing employees.
Amazing. Yeah, that's really, really valuable, because like Keith Cunningham, one of our mentors, says, you either pay now or you pay later. And so you
Yep.
pay upfront and you pay people very well and you get the best people.
Yeah.
Or you pay later in the brain damage of turnover.
Yeah. And we've always said we want to be able to give good people good jobs, and we want people who are working with us to want to work with us.
Mhm.
And I intentionally use the word with, not for. I really want everyone on our team to realize that nothing happens without the whole team. And I think that has added to the longevity that we've had with our people.
Yeah, so many entrepreneurial pearls that you've shared. I think that, yeah, it's surprising, but a lot of this stuff took me several years to figure out. So it's just, it is a process. But if you start listening to this podcast right now and like start there, oh my gosh, you'll be so much farther than we were when we first started out, right?
I mean, it took us, I will say, having a business coach has also helped. We finally made that investment 2 years ago, and it's really helped us in forward thinking, in meeting cadence, in focus cadence, holding each other accountable, has been invaluable. And that is definitely one of those pay now, pay later. We had hit this point where we were like, okay, so Gut's gotten us this far, but we're really going to need help if we want to get from here to here with no one that really has a business background. And that was a really big investment at the time, but has paid off in immeasurable ways.
Amazing insights. Thank you. So we always ask 2 of our guests as we close. We always have two of our. We ask all of our guests 2 questions. The first one is, what is your definition of wealthy?
So, I've already mentioned that I really don't care about money. I realize that please don't take this the wrong way. Money is very important. I like to eat really well and I like to travel. So we need a certain amount of money, but I would say really for me, and it's been a huge silver lining since my accident, is family time. I would have never gotten the time that I've had with our boys had I stayed as a clinical OBGYN. And being able to have shared experiences, and we eat dinner as a family almost every day, to me, that makes me feel wealthy, right? And I wouldn't trade that stuff for anything. They'll hear me say that I would probably kill a puppy to be back in the OR, I really miss the operating room, but the time and the stuff I've been able to do with them, I mean, I could almost make myself cry talking about it. And so I think for me that's a huge thing. Yeah,
It's funny how looking back, like the worst things that happen have so much good come out of them in the end, don't they?
yeah, yeah. And again, you know, please don't take this the wrong way, but there are a lot of shitty days, you know. It's kind of, we're in it for the long game. And, but yes, I am not convinced that had I stayed on the path I was on, to be quite honest, that I'd still be married, that I wouldn't have had a heart attack by now. I was just go, 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 like most of us are, right?
Mhm.
And so, yes, 10 years later, I mean, August 3rd was my 10-year anniversary away from clinical medicine. Not that I'm counting. But 10 years later, I can speak like this, right? If it were 10 years ago, you'd be talking to a shell of who I am now.
So what is one mindset, habit, or strategy that separates someone who is wealthy versus someone who is not?
I mean, for me, a lot of it came down to journaling. I have a gratitude journal. I start my day. Sometimes it's not easy coming up with 3 things that I'm grateful for, right? But it just shifts you and puts you in the right space for the day. You're going to laugh, but at one point I was making vision boards. Admittedly, I haven't done that in a while.
We still do.
Yeah, I was like, that's what I'm thinking to myself. I'm like, oh, I haven't done that in a while. And really planning. I mean, one of my favorite things that I did pre-COVID was we had mommy and me trips. Our boys are very different. They love each other to pieces, but they have very different interests. And I like to travel. My husband, not so much. And so I would let each kid pick a place, and we would have a long weekend and focus on what they liked. And the other one would stay home and, eat Taco Bell in their underwear, watching TV with dad, and really kind of making sure that there was always a trip coming up. To be like, I needed something to look forward to as a family, and making sure that we were getting away as a family. In the beginning, we did it kind of quarterly. And then, as I mentioned, we self-funded. So there was a period of time where vacations were just not going to happen. And so then I had to figure out what could we do locally to build these experiences. And that's when my youngest and I started cooking together. My older one and I, he's my expedition buddy. We would find places to go. And so I realized I just gave you a really long answer to a short question.
No, that was
That's
a
amazing.
perfect answer. I
Yeah.
think we've heard throughout the years so many people who get such value out of spending the one-on-one time traveling with their kids.
Or
And this,
experiences with
yeah, I
kids.
mean,
Yeah.
This is something we were going to talking about last week. So it's very, very pertinent in our lives right now that we're thinking about this kind of stuff too. So I think it's really helpful for people to hear that. That's very, very cool.
Thanks. I'm trying.
So thank you so much, Stephanie, for this and all the pearls you shared. Could you tell people how to reach out and get a hold of you to hear more about your business?
Sure. So I was not smart enough many moons ago to come up with an alias. So I am, in fact, Stephanie Pearson on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Our company name is Pearson Ravitz. And we have a website. If you Google Pearson Ravitz, I think I am more accessible now than I ever was. And I'm real easy to find.
Thank you. Amazing.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.